Got a beautiful view here. Really love this view. This is one of my favorite views. We got the birds out. It's beautiful today. I'm here today just to like speak on some certain things I like talking about. The mind is our first reality. This is this has been a thought in my mind for the longest, and honestly, like it's been unfolding in the majority of my life. A lot of our existence and consciousness and all of that comes from the precursor of what our mind has received, and it also has its own way of thinking things, because you have the subconscious, the unconscious, and the mind is truly our first reality, because it's the system that allows us to really just perceive and have all these things. You're able to think, feel. Like I pause at that because it's crazy. Like, we're able to think and feel. Like, the amount of power that's simply in thinking and feeling is insane, because I can feel a certain way, and then my mind can either filter it or create its own translation of it to therefore help me or show me a certain perspective or view that it kind of wants to undergo. And of course our physical and our mind goes together, but what we see is what we tend to believe. And it's really important to understand what you're feeding yourself. It's really important to understand, like, you sometimes don't need to listen to your mind. It can get wild. I've been reading this book. I'm almost finished with it, but it's called How to Stop Thinking. And you walk with this question, like, well, how do you live without thinking? But what the book is truly talking about is really just saying, like, we every day live on, and we're receiving a plethora, bundles of information, and sometimes those thoughts that can transpire from thinking of it can get wild. It can get dark. It can get you don't need to be thinking about that. And it's your thoughts can really damage what you're doing, because sometimes these thoughts they come from the unconscious, and the unconscious is just trying to speak its way throughout to its own understanding, and what it's perceiving, to the conscious part of you. And it can cause a lot of destruction, because if you feel as if that what you thought was correct, when you try to proceed to make conscious decisions, it's gonna inflict you in such a damaging way. And that's why I really say, like, it's our first reality. It's more of a filter, though. It's more of a filter. Heavy emphasis on it's more of a filter. But that's a part of the that's what comes with the mind. It's always running, and we may feel as if that we can't dictate the way we use those thoughts to create more positive outlooks, to create more. Damn, I'm fucking thirsty. I'm not even gonna lie. I barely drink water. I should have drank water. I drank like 2 cups before I came up here, but now I'm like not even thirsty. It's like I have like a dry mouth. But when you actually start thinking about your thoughts, I'm telling you, bro, like, you start going down so many paths. And of course, like, this is not to say that you, like, again, like reference to the book, or even just saying, like, it is an important process. you shouldn't downplay the idea that you can just walk around and not think or have a thought. Like, you need those things, but it's how are you filtering these things, and are you delivering them to a more positive filtration system. Like, if you have a Brita, right? Your brain is the Brita. The thoughts and the thinks are your water. You wouldn't want to put your water in a filter that has been aged and been old, or it's not washed. You're filtering it through a system, so now whatever water is in that cup and you now drink it, for a fact, whatever you're drinking, it's not gonna have a positive. You will start thinking negatively. You will start thinking negatively. You would start distorting those thoughts. You would start distorting what you're thinking, because you're unconscious, which is a whole nother conversation. I'll probably most definitely get into that. It's working its own system to show you, like, should you be thinking about this? Is this something that's happened before? And if it has, how do I deal with it now? How can I build better progression to better understand these thoughts and feelings? So, yeah, like, our mind is our reality, and you should take your time and really understand how you're filtering the things that you consume, the things that you are receiving, and try to create a world based off of those thoughts where it's more positive. As of recently, I've had, like, so many thoughts, so many feelings, and one of the things I've been doing to better deal with those thoughts, those feelings, is just building exercises like saying mantras or breathing techniques. I realized that my way of thinking and the way how I filter thoughts is very much as important to the other things I will speak about. Yo, holy shit. Yo, this word always gets me. The individuation process. This is a process that was written, and you could say written, studied, and done by psychologist Carl Jung. The individuation process, it's one of the most interesting processes in the psyche. If in high school, before high school started, and honestly, like, just going down throughout my whole life, a big theme of it has been trying to transform myself and better understand how to grow to become whole and fulfilled within my internal, to filter through to the external world, and honestly live with peace, live with wholeness and satisfaction with my life. I didn't know that throughout my life I was following this process. The one thing in my life that's always stuck with me is dreaming, being able to exist in this, quote, other realm, other state of field, even crosses in the sciences of the metaphysical, where you, as some form of energy, consciousness, construct or walker of the universe, or lens of the universe. I realized that dreams were an important tool for me, and it's kind of interesting how they played a part in my process of coming to become whole. I'm not fully whole, but I'm at a stage now where it feels more fulfilling. There's four to five different steps in the individuation process. If I can list them out in order properly, I've wrote this down somewhere. You have 1, confronting your ego, encountering your shadow, exploring your anima and animus, and 4, revealing of archetypes, and 5, becoming your whole self. So you may say, like, what are those things? What can this mean for someone individually? It's a process where in psychoanalytic therapy or psychology specifically, you have someone who goes under an unfolding of who they were or are destined to be. So you're getting all this information about yourself to better have a stronger, flexible, satisfying, and not easy but satisfying way of living and unfolding who you are, instead of living in the terms of things are the way how they are, therefore of I only exist because I was birthed. But you start realizing that you come from a seed of I like to say that, we're infinity as people. We're infinity, meaning like you exist across multiple planes of your own life. You have this part and that part and this and that. And if you really dive down into processing who you are, you've basically, and you are anything that you could or want to be, right? When you're encountering your ego, my best definition of ego is the I, the I in consciousness. Therefore I am the ego in this conscious state. I see this, something deep down, the ego. And it's not per se a bad thing. It's not a thing of like good or bad. It's a level, I'm still trying to understand how to tame my ego. Tame it in a way where it respectively doesn't harm anyone, but I'm able to aid myself with proper validation, but do not regard the fact that other people have their own way of living and egos and systems of their lives and functions. So encountering the shadow, it's so fucking interesting, because I remember the first time when I encountered my shadow. It was in my dream. It was in a few of my dreams. It was so interesting. And I knew what it was. I was like, oh, that's an other half of me. At first I was like, it's another half of me. But then I realized what the shadow really is. It's the parts that you push to the side. Usually it's negative parts of yourself. And it's the things that you need to come into a coexistence with. You need to kind of treat your shadow as you and realize, like, what, I don't need to put this on the back burner or whatever. I should accept, you could say, I can accept these flaws, I can accept these things of my shadow, so therefore I'm going to integrate myself with my shadow. And I remember throughout my dreams, they were very specific. The first time I encountered my shadow, and this is very interesting, I witnessed my own funeral. I witnessed my own funeral, and this is back in early sophomore year. And I witnessed my own funeral in my dream. I see all my friends, and I was in the position of my own casket, and I saw this thing behind the tree, and it was like this staticky, almost like chromatic aberration sort of thing standing behind the tree. And it didn't wave at me, but it did this thing where, like, it made itself known, kind of just like this, and it was looking directly at me. So I was very confused by that dream. At that time, I wasn't analyzing my dreams. I wasn't really deep down in psychology. I kind of just lived as was. I'm a sophomore. I knew that life was to come. I've always had this thing about me in my life where I'm always thinking about or seeing things through the lens of a future or whatsoever. So it's like I didn't think much of it. I knew that I would come to an understanding of what it was, and so I am here now, have a fuller understanding of what it is. The second one, I was in like this hotel room, and my shadow was standing like in front of a. Oh, it's fucking flies. I was standing in front of a window. I can't even say what the fuck am I talking. I'm like I was standing in front of a window, yo, and I looked through the glass, but it wasn't a mirror image of me. It was like a sort of. It was definitely a shadow, not a reflection. It was a shadow, but it was like this thing, and I began to, throughout my art, it's so weird, like, bringing back up the unconscious. I started unconsciously when I was drawing in a few of my early, I think it was in my early or, yeah, it's fairly like in my early or late sketchbooks. I started drawing out my shadow, and it started revealing itself throughout these different scenes, which kind of represented a physical representation of how I was unfolding and creating an integration with my shadow. And I would say what my shadow, I the flaws were kind of really, having the dream of a funeral. I think I've always had this chip on my shoulder where the idea of death has always lurked around me, because throughout my life I've always had to protect myself physically or mentally, and I think that represented almost like you need to understand that you won't burn out. You don't have to fear or have anxiety of every moment as a moment of death, that everything is going to end. But you need to understand that you have time. You have time to do the things that you want to do, and you can create purpose by integrating the satisfaction and the little thing called life, integrating yourself with that and realizing, like, you have. I'm looking at trees right now. I'm speaking. I feel good. I feel good. I'm talking right now. I'm speaking. I'm thinking about these thoughts, and I'm happy that I'm thinking about these thoughts and processing them, and it's coming straight from here. So I was able to integrate with my shadow. I would say my exploration of the anima and animus came through, and it does come through. It's weird, it's a theme, but it comes through my relationship with my aunts, but it also has came through with my relationships romantically. It taught me how to develop a more sentimental, you could say, feminine side. I don't know if I pronounced that right. And also adhere to a positive, healthy side of male. You have people on the internet, it's fucking funny, but like alpha male, this and that, but like you gotta tap into your other side, like, cause it's like you're only pitting yourself down, basically limiting yourself to a perspective where you won't be able to be sentimental, you won't be able to have a positive understanding that comes from genetically and psychologically from a woman, right? And a lot of people need to get rid of that thing where it's like, you're acting like a girl, or you're acting like a guy, or you're not a man, or it's very harmful. It's very harmful. So, you know, that's where I encountered my anima and animus. I think I still, I think I'm still, you know, I don't think it only from romantic relationships. Um, it will come to unfold. And archetypes, where I'm at right now with archetypes, it's interesting. It's actually interesting because the dreams I've been having recently are really interesting. I've had I've had archetypes. So to explain archetypes, I'm over here by. So it's like they usually show up in your art, your dreams, more of a percent in your dreams, because that's more of a you get to dive. That's a whole nother realm. That's a whole nother field where you're just exploring these different things, and the mind brings up its own narratives and systems of how you think. It doesn't favor or gift you things, but it puts things on the stage to be like, this is what this is. Are you going to be able to process this to take it in your waking life, which is you physically opening your eyes, you being able to breathe in air, the oxygen, the conscious air, breathing it in, breathing it out, and move through with that. So archetypes, they're these messages that come from symbols. So like you could have, they represent themselves in many ways, like mandalas when you're physically creating an art, so like symbols, or even just like characters in your dreams. It can literally, quite literally, be reoccurring people, or wise old men, or old woman, or like sort of like like very like imagine like an old man, like you open your eyes, you see an old man in the corner of your room in your dream, and it's like, okay, and then he's like, you are what you are, and this is what this is, you must move forward. So it's like that's an archetype. You're something's communicating with you to give you insight into per se another stage in your life, in your waking life, or for, in a way, future reference, like maybe 4 days from that dream of that day, or 4 days from that painting that you created. So maybe 5 days, or the after those 4 days, the next day, which is the 5th day, you'll end up making an art piece, a painting or something, and it shows up. So that's what archetypes are, and I find them interesting, and that's the stage that I'm at in the individuation process. So that's 4. I really don't know if there's a time limit or like a cap of when you're supposed to reach each thing, but my hypothesis is that depending on a few things like your function